You're listening to Adventures in Project Management with John Goad.
I had a coaching call the other day, and it's funny how you tend to, I'll set an objective or, kind of a theme, something that we're going to be discussing for each call, but I keep it pretty broad. And, I've learned to listen. That's my number one objective, is to listen, to hear what pain or what problem or what's on someone's plate for that day at that time that that we can address. And many times it's a part of a broader issue, and so that's always good to let them speak and kind of work through that, and then we can go where we need to go with the session. But a lot of times we'll get down a rabbit trail, and rabbit trails aren't bad, I don't believe, because a lot of times they'll lead to a place that is that speaks to kind of the overall problem, maybe underlying conditions or concerns or other pressures. And if we can help people kind of unfold some of that, it's usually really good. And so on this particular call, and I'm not gonna use any use any names or anything right now, because this is an ongoing client, an ongoing process, and so I just want to keep the anonymity and privacy. But it's a great lesson, and so I wanted to talk about it. But so during the course of this particular call the other day, we found that one of the big concerns, and this was kind of out of left field a little bit for this individual. He's a web developer, and does very well, and very talented. Does excellent work. And he asked me, just point blank, I said, what's on your plate today? What's your pain today? And he said, John, have you ever had to fire a client? and I kind of chuckled, because yes, as an independent project manager or consultant, every once in a while, and I've only had a handful over the years, where I've had to actually depart from my commitment or my contractual obligation for a variety of reasons. But, immediately, as soon as he asked that, it's funny, because immediately all these memories of those few times just kind of rushed through my head. And I thought, wow, let's hear more. And so I asked him, I said, tell me a little bit more, why would you, one, lead into a question like that? And certainly something is really going wrong if you're asking me this. And so he proceeded to kind of lay out the situation. And so as an independent web developer, he has had this client come, and he is starting out this particular venture. And so I think he gave a very good, very, very competitive price, probably too low to this particular business owner. And she has a brick and mortar store in a downtown, and wants to expand to online sales and have an online store. And so the web developer, he's very good at this. This is what he does. And so he put together kind of a draft game plan for them to kind of talk through, to set some expectations. And then he put together and I may be using the wrong term because I'm not a web developer guy, but essentially a draft that was up and running, kind of a thing. So in the virtual world, so this client could see what he had done. And he spent a fair amount of time. The graphics, he showed me, the graphics look wonderful. They had each one of these products that were well laid out in an online store on one of the pages, and you click on an option if you want to purchase one of these items, and then there were a couple of you have even further options for each one of these. So if you wanted to click on A, then you click on a product, and then you would have 3 or 4 more choices to further customize that selection, which is this developer, he came up with that on his own and kind of was offering that as, hey, this is an added option for your people that find you online and would want to purchase from you. This only makes it better, more customization and all of that. And it seemed like she really liked it, I guess. But then she would think about it, and then want to make changes. And so, then the web developer, he would respond, and apparently, this went back and forth a few times, and it just felt as though he wasn't able to hit the mark. Every time he would, he wanted to just overperform because, one, he's starting out, and two, he cares about his product and his work, which is great. But, he wanted to, every time there was another request for another change or something, he wanted to just go a little beyond. Well, he found that this was really becoming a pattern, and a not good pattern. And I reflected back to, I guess, one of the times that I had to let a client go, and it was a large project, and development project, and I was, in the role of project manager / owner's rep for this particular project. And I'd been on board for about a year, and my first task with this was they had architects and engineers that were all responding to the creative and visionary ideas of some planners and some vision people with this particular development. And over time, it just became this big mess of lots of work and no milestones and things like that. So one of my first objectives was to come in and give some organization to it, put tasks together with dollars for each of the consultants so that they could work against a task to a deliverable. Real basic stuff, but it was a big deal. And so we kind of got that going in a positive direction, and then got some municipal pushback. There's some neighbor pushback, things like that started to kind of stall the project. But then the client just wanted to maybe go in a complete different direction. And so we started to go in another direction. And what I found was things just started, there were just a lot of changes, a lot of things, a change of direction, a change of heart behind it. And it got to the point where I was having difficulty helping guide anyone navigate through this. And so I thought, before someone makes the decision for me, I've got to tell them, hey, thank you. I like working with you, and this could be really great, but we're changing so much that I don't think we're going to be able to get to where we need to go. So I'm going to depart, and, all on really good terms, the whole bit. But that was a really hard decision for me. It was a lot of, a good portion of the monthly income that I was receiving. And, I had a young family at the time. And so it was a huge decision. And so that was kind of reflecting in the back of my mind when I was talking to this web developer that, I said, okay, so you're considering firing your first client. What are your concerns? What are your fears with that? And he mentioned, well, gosh, what if I get bad reviews? What if she goes and tells everybody that I didn't do a good job? And all of those things that come to mind as either a freelancer or a small business person, or even anyone in business, those are real fears. One, because we like to take pride in our work and we want to do a good job, and there's always two sides to every story. So if a customer isn't satisfied, and some people tend to lash out when they're not satisfied, which is unfortunate. But so I told him, I said, okay, these are very real concerns. Let's talk through them. So how about your first concern, a bad review, a bad Yelp review or Google or something like that. And I said, what I'm finding, and I'm new to this podcasting, I'm new to a lot of this world, but I'm finding that a review is still a review. Even a bad one is giving you action, giving you activity. And if the good ones outweigh the bad ones, that's what we want to have happen, right? But certainly nothing to get hung up on. Granted, if say this was his first and only client and he had to fire her, so the only review theoretically, that he could have maybe a bad review. Okay, well, that's a place to start, but I wouldn't let that hinder making a good business decision to move forward or move away from this client. Because she was clearly, through the changes and continual changes, was clearly costing him time that he hadn't budgeted in the quote that he gave her to develop this site. And it was taking him away from other work that he had. It got to be such an extraordinary amount of time, and it felt as though she could never be satisfied, that I can understand, how that would work. And I said, okay, what about her telling everybody, okay, you have a bad review. That's one thing. Somebody, vents on Google or Yelp or whatever platform. They gripe about, Joe Web Developer did not do me a solid. He stole my money, whatever. Okay, so a lot of that's blowing steam, and that's one aspect to the picture. So what it then in a network situation, so she goes and tells other people, other small businesses and people that she knows, hey, I would never use this guy. Yeah, there's a possibility of that. But I'm thinking, if I have bad service somewhere, I'm not the guy that goes, to look online to give a bad review. It has to be something really, really massive in order for me to do something like that. But in terms of even talking to my network about a bad experience, unless it's directly applicable to something that they're wanting to do right now, I might caution someone, hey, don't, think twice before using this guy or something along those lines based upon my experience. But I'm not going to go to my phone and start scrolling through all of my contacts and let everybody, let the world know. I mean, that's a waste of time. It's a waste of everybody else's time. And so I said, maybe that's not as big of a fear either, in the context of things when you take a look at it. So we kind of talked through some of that. And I said, I think you have a few options here, rather than just, nuking this client. Now, granted, back to my example, I had also thought of, because I was newer in my business, I'd only been in business maybe, 5 or 6 years at that point, still building my clientele, building my reputation. I didn't really market a lot other than me marketing to other people at that time. And so, I thought of the same thing, gosh, if I terminate this relationship, what does that mean? This could be really bad for me and prevent me from getting other work, because these developers within the work that I was doing, they do talk to one another, or, it's a small world out there. So that was very real for me. So I looked through my options and I thought, okay, is there something that I could fix with this relationship? Could I explain some things? Could I draw some people into a discussion so that we could actually have a positive outcome? And I would feel more empowered to impart value on this client without some of the frustration that everybody's having because of all the change of direction. So I really thought through that. And unfortunately for that scenario, it just wasn't possible. There were too many moving parts, too many people, too many levels of, management. There were politics that were kind of involved locally too. So there were a lot of levers that I wouldn't be able to get all my hands on all of them in order to get us moving into a good positive direction. And so weighing that, I thought, okay, then I would rather depart and not be accused of just hanging around and not providing any value, because that's a consultant's worst nightmare, is to, at least mine, to be assigned to a project or have a project or a client and then have them wonder, what are you here for? I hear the stories, but I didn't want to live that at that time, or still don't. So I decided, okay, I can't fix it. I can't help navigate around it. I'm going to have to move on. So I did. But with that same kind of thought process in mind, speaking to the web developer, I said, so you've got a couple of ideas. All right, I've got a couple of ideas for you. You have a couple of paths forward. One, you can terminate, as you said. Just take what I gave you, and I think he came up with this one and said, hey, I think I can just walk and she can keep what I've developed so far and pay somebody to finish it for her. That's one option. Two, he could rightfully, per the terms of his contract, say, this isn't working. Thank you. We're done, and that's it, with no transfer of any license to use anything. That would be legitimate as well. He could provide a credit, all these things. Or he could have a heart-to-heart with this client. Because in my example, there were quite a few. I had multiple bosses. There was a hierarchy there. In this case, there's just one individual, one person that's the client. So it's a lot easier in terms of the communication, convincing somebody or persuading someone to change course or to consider an argument or consider your position. Much easier if it's just one point of contact, one person. So he said, okay, I'm gonna think about that. And the next, so we're doing weekly calls. So the next call, the next week, when I tuned in, obviously I was dying to know what happened while I was gone. And I said, okay, how's it going with this client? And he said, John, I decided to do the last option that we talked about, and that's have a heart-to-heart. And he said it was really good. He said he was able to kind of talk through a little bit of the frustration that while he wants to deliver the best possible product that he can for his clients, that it was just frustrating because he felt like he kept bringing these really great ideas and they just weren't good enough for her, or she had some little tweak and then it would just blow up. Not arguing, but just kind of the whole, the mojo of, the creativity would just kind of blow up and it just became hard. And so anyway, I guess it was received really well, and they had a good talk, and he retained her as his client. And he said, I think we're gonna work through this. I think it's gonna be fine. And so anyway, so that was a good example, I guess, of an opportunity that a lot of times when we think we are boxed in, it's easy to inflate, what's on the other side. I mean, when I was getting ready to fire my development client, I told you I had a small family or a young family at that time and everything, and it was a significant amount of income for us. But I think that I had a little bit of fear in me there because it was close to Christmas time, the whole bit, which is not ideal time for me to secure work. Usually there's other times that, that people are thinking about engaging in contracts than around the holidays. But it's, now 20 or 15, 20 years later, when I look back, it wasn't that big of a deal. I mean, certainly not in hindsight, but at the time it was huge. And it felt like every time I would inch forward towards the decision I wanted to make to terminate, that I could think of 10 reasons why this could all go wrong, or, it just could get into my head pretty fast. And so I understand very clearly how that can happen, even for this web developer with his first client that he had to consider firing. That was huge. And it was a great lesson for him to carry with him, into future contracts and agreements, and maybe setting expectations and those types of things. I'll be talking about that in the future, I know. But a lot of times we think that it's going to be bigger than, we fear it's going to be bigger than it actually is in terms of the pain or the hurt or the damage control or whatnot. And oftentimes it's not nearly as bad as we allow ourselves to believe. So if we stay focused on just kind of going through the options, like giving a fair assessment of where we really are. I was telling somebody the other day that if I were to go buy a house, I built my house here, but if I were to go buy a house, I would probably have one of my buddies in the construction industry do a walkthrough with me, because there would be my perception, my view would be skewed by the fact that I really want the deal. I would want the deal to happen. So I might not see some of the things that I need to see for a building inspection. But I do that stuff for friends and other, I can go look at a building and pick it apart, that kind of a thing. But I would have so much, I guess, heart vested in it that I would want the thing to happen that I could very well miss something. And I think the same thing kind of applies when we're in the middle of the battle, in the fight, when we're in the midst of trying to provide the best that we can, either whether it's our job or if we have a client that we're pursuing to try to provide that value. A lot of times it's easy for us to just miss the fact that, okay, yes, we're focused on our work, we're focused on our deliverables, what we need to do, how we need to perform, and we're concerned about how that's received. So many times we don't have, the only feedback you get is negative. You've heard that if we don't hear anything, then everything must be fine. But that can be taken to and built into a huge hurdle to move beyond and make a hard decision. I just want to encourage everybody out there to, stay focused objectively as you can to just break down a big decision or a big change in direction with your business or at the work that you do, or even personally. Just break it down into smaller steps, smaller parts, so that you can analyze and you can really give a good assessment. Don't hesitate to bring somebody else in from the outside, whether it's a friend or a colleague, or if you have to hire somebody to come and help you navigate through some of that decision making. I think that would always prove to be money and time well spent to do that. I always like having another set of eyes on some of the things that I do, just because if they're very important, you bet I'm going to run it by a trusted somebody else to make sure that I'm consistent with my message and, just how I'm portraying or conveying a point. So don't hesitate to do that. Don't be fearful. If you start operating from a fear position, that, this web developer, he was a little bit locked up. I mean, it was a conundrum for, he was really, and I get it. I've been there. I'll probably be there again, maybe tomorrow. I don't know, but he was really locked up because this was a big decision for him. And it's easy. You've heard what paralysis or by analysis. So you can become paralyzed if you overanalyze. And the more you analyze, I'm an analytic. The more you analyze, the bigger the thing grows. And then it can really prevent you from any forward progress. I'd rather punch through something and say, oops, shouldn't have done that. Maybe I'll look at it a little differently next time. I would rather do that than just get locked down by the fear of what's on the other side of a decision. Now, trust me, I get locked down plenty. I still do. I don't want you thinking that I have this thing nailed. I'm just sharing with you the experience that I've had and how this works for me. And in this particular call, and I'm excited to say, following up even further, that things are progressing well with the website. And I think that this is going to be a happy customer. And who knows, she may turn out to be a fan of this web developer and his concept and his design. Sometimes if you go that extra mile and work through the hard stuff, it can really shine on the other side. And you can have just this almost camaraderie with either your client or whomever was on the other side of the table when you were navigating through the hard thing. A lot of times you find that because you went through that tough stuff, there's like a bond there, and there's trust on the other side when it's positive, and it can turn out to be a really great, relationship. And so, I've seen that as well, to where you work through some hard stuff, and it's funny. A lot of times, many times I've been brought in on projects as kind of that second or third guy, the cleanup, the cleanup crew. So particularly in the owner's rep realm, there a lot of times somebody will get into a role that they just get in over their head, or it was because they were brought to the table by a relationship or something like that, and not necessarily qualifications. Or a couple of them just BS their way into stuff too. But the bottom line is it just happens. Sometimes there's turnover there. But when I come in as kind of that next guy, or even fresh into a new relationship without anybody else before me, there's a lot of times there's kind of this period where everybody's kind of just seeing where everyone else is coming from, and almost like a trial period, that you have to work through. And sometimes it's really smooth and trust comes real fast, and boy, we just hit our stride and kind of get going, which is really great. And then other times it just seems like it's difficult. I had a project in the Midwest last year that I was the bank actually introduced me to the project because they had some concerns. They felt there were some risks and someone needed to come in and kind of mitigate. So I was asked to kind of come in after the team had already been established. So the contractor, architect, the owner, the engineers, everybody was already together. And then here comes John, and they were getting ready to start construction. And I had a lot of ideas on some things that we needed to kind of clean up and tidy up on the financial side of things, just for a little more accountability. Didn't want to get in the way of progress or getting started or anything like that. But it really didn't sit very well with the project team because they kind of felt it became this us against, me against them kind of thing. And I never want that. Like I said, there's always a period of time when some of this happens, but it's really funny because it never got ugly at all. It just was a little strained early, if you know what I mean, to where, communication wise, I would have to draw out what I needed because there was just kind of the base level communication that I was looped into, and, I had to fight to get CC'd on certain things or make sure that I was going to be on site when other things were happening. And, just little, it gets to be kind of like little irritations while you're getting started. But then some of that started to smooth out a little bit. And lo and behold, there were some problems with some of the funding for this project. And so there was a gap that became wider and wider because some of the fundraising and ability for this client to secure funds it wasn't all complete when they started construction, and the bank was fine with that because they had a plan, but the plan wasn't working real well the further that we got. And so it was pretty evident that there was going to be some strain on the whole team with regard to the funding aspect. And so fortunately I was able to kick in and I helped with some accountability. We helped just in communicating with the bank and just providing assurance that nothing fishy was going on. Everything was legit. It just and costs were managed well, and ultimately it healed itself. The client was able to secure additional funds, and the thing continued. It was built, but as a result, a couple of those team members that were probably some of the most resistant to my participation just became almost friends. We went through some hard stuff, and now I know I could call either one of them and talk to them about a problem on another project or anything, anytime, and maybe go meet for dinner sometime or something like that. And it's just interesting to see how kind of walking that road a little bit, working through that hard spot, can really forge a positive relationship. And I get a kick out of that. I really like that. I love the trust building, just that process of building trust in a genuine way, not in a car salesman way. And sorry, car sales guys, you know what I mean? It's not that wasn't, not all of you. There's just that one guy that we see on, TV for the used cars with the purple leader suit and all that. But no, you know what I mean? Not in a contrived way or anything like that. I love the genuine process of trust building. And sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's very quick, which is really a lot of fun, because then you can get things going and it seems like you don't waste a lot of time kind of in that development piece. But then for those times that take longer to build trust or to engage with that relationship, it's definitely not a waste, because it just forges something a little stronger sometimes. And so be encouraged about that. If you have a client to fire, or if you have a big hurdle or something that is coming up in your workload or in your leadership role, or if you're a project manager or a creative that has a deliverable that it's just the expectation just can't seem to be hit, don't be afraid to just take it head on and talk to the people involved, talk to the parties involved, see if you can come to some resolution, or at least start chipping away at the problem together, rather than feeling bound by fear or avoiding it, because you avoid it today, it's going to be twice as big tomorrow. And so that's my encouragement for today. And hey, I'm happy I could share this session with you, and I look forward to the next time. And we'll talk to you soon. That's all I've got. All right, take care.